we want to welcome you here to Life of Worship today. We're so glad that you've joined us, and we are on Yitro. Father, we come before you in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, and we thank you and we praise you and we exalt your holy name, for you are good all the time. There is none like you. You are our glorious Savior. You are our deliverer. You are our song, and we give you praise and honor and glory for that, and so much more for what you've done for us, for giving us your word that brings forth life within us, freeing us from the bondages of slavery. Father, you've done so much, and we can never give you enough thanks and praise and honor and glory. But today, as we gather around the table to study your word, your words, Father, Yeshua, who brings forth life, let, Father, that life just manifest within our hearts, and Father, bring forth your truth to all that surround us and are around us, so that we can truly be the firstborn, a nation of priests. Father, we don't want to do it without you. We cannot do this walk without you. So we give you glory and honor, and we ask that you open up our hearts and our minds and our eyes to see, Father, that your words would go forth and penetrate and be good, our hearts, and be good soil. Father, we thank you and we praise you in Yeshua's name. Amen. We're going to go ahead and jump into Exodus 18 and read. And Father, we praise you that Roxana has an interview this week. Give her favor. And Father, let her be crowned with favor and shielded with favor. And let her be at the job she's supposed to be at, that you've called her at, that will be a blessing to her life. And not anything but a blessing. And for Stan, Father, we do pray for Brayon and for Stan, Father, for you know every need. Father, Brayon is a homeless person, and Father, bring forth, you are his home, but Father, bring forth all the needs. Show himself that you are the way maker and the need meter. And the same for Stan, Father. Give Stan the words to say as he ministers to this man. And Father, you are the way, the truth, and the life. And more than anything, we need you. But Father, also, you are our shelter, but you also bring forth provision. Let that be so. And we praise you, Father, in Yeshua's name. All right. Okay. So are you ready?
Yeah. Where do you want me to read?
We start at our Torah portion.
Chapter 18, verse 1?
Yes, we'll start there.
Okay. Now Yitro, or Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that El had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, how Yahweh had brought Israel out of Egypt. And Yitro, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Moses' wife, Zipporah, after he sent her away, and her 2 sons, of whom one was named Gershom. For he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. And the other was named Eleazar. For he said, the El of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Then Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his son and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was camped in the mount of Yah. And he went and he sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law Yitro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. Then Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and he bowed down and kissed him, and they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law all that Yahweh had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had befallen them on the journey, and how Yahweh had delivered them. And Yitro rejoiced over all the goodness which Yahweh had done to Israel in delivering them from the hand of the Egyptians. So Yitro said, blessed be Yahweh, who delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of Pharaoh, and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that Yahweh is greater than all the gods. Indeed, it is proven when they dealt proudly against the people. Then Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for Yah, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law before Yah. And it came about the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood about Moses from the morning until the evening. Now, when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, what is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, and all the people stand about you from morning until evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, it comes to me, and I judge between man and his neighbor and make known the statutes of God and his laws.
All right, so here we are. We are beginning a Torah portion that is probably one of the most significant Torah portions that we have, because it concerns the ketubah. It concerns the commands of Yah, that our ketubah, our wedding contract with him. And yet we begin the Torah portion with Yitro, the name of possibly a pagan priest of old. That's not saying that he remained that way, but yet we're beginning it that way. And that very name in itself is going to have significance throughout everything else we read. So therefore, we have got to look up the name to discover some of the things it means and how does it apply to our lives. But let's give a little bit of background. It's been, let's see, they left Egypt on of Eve 15, and 15 days later in the month of in the next month, there is a great battle. Of course, we know that Egypt it was defeated at the Red Sea. Now we're at the beginning of the third month, which is in the first day. So they've been out for approximately 45 days or so, and they've experienced victory. They've experienced thirst and hunger and complaining a lot along the way. They camped at Elim, had an oasis. They murmured. They saw the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud. They experienced that every day, and they've experienced miraculous revelation. And in 5 days till Shavuot, there's the giving of the Torah. So that's a little bit of background, just a little bit of review. And guess what? We know that, but we're going to move on. Okay, so Jethro. Here we have this betrothal ceremony. Here we have Moses' father-in-law. And it says, Exodus 18:11, now I know that Yah is greater than all the gods, all the Elohim, for in the very thing in which they behaved proudly, he was above them. Okay, so to understand this statement and why it's important, it's vital to understand how ancient people observed other gods. Okay, to them, Yah was no different than all the rest of the pantheon of gods which they served, and they served a lot because, in general, they thought, well, we may not be able to attain God, but we will serve the nature and the elements of it that manifest God, for they will be like gods to us, and that's what they did. So there's a God for everything in general back in the A&E time, and so if we understand that. And we look at Jethro, whether it's a name or whether it is a title, either way, we're looking at this gentleman. And to me, it indicates that when he says, now I know, that previously he didn't know. Now I know that he is Yah. Now that I know he's greater than all other gods. I am paraphrasing these things, but so, to me, that says there's been a revelation. Now, there are some out there that say that he served Yah before this time too. But to me, it really indicates when he says, now I know, to me, it says, I didn't know before. And guess what? The rumor mill was going. News had spread in that little period of time of what happened to Egypt. The countries and the nations were also fearful of this group of people that were coming out of Egypt, of Israel. And the word had spread far and wide. And here we have Yitro coming and saying, I'm going to go check this thing out and get an update from the mouth of where it happened, the leader of these people, my son-in-law. And so he comes, and I also think it's significant that the advice that we get in this Torah portion that Moshe begins to live by comes from somebody that was previously outside of the covenant. So what does that say to us? Could it possibly be that Yah can use other vessels to bring forth his word or his admonishment?
Yes.
Joy.
So the thing I think of this every year is that it never says, although Yitro does say that, and God is directing you to do it, but Moses didn't go to Yah and say, because a lot of times he would get counsel, or he would go to the father, and like with the 7 daughters or whatever, and he went to them, I will see, and so he gave a commandment. He didn't do that with this. So it just makes me wonder, although I understand that he needed help. So maybe that is the case. But I always wondered, he never did go to the Father. That was not a commandment from the Father that I could see. Am I right or wrong?
You're right. In fact, several years ago, I taught, it could be, I've taught this Torah portion in 17, 18, 19, 20, and 22. So it's been one that I teach a lot. But in one of those years, because I always try to go from a different perspective, and I went from that perspective. Did Yah command, or did they want him to look as the Father? But this time we're going to look at it from the other side, because I've already done the side that you've looked at. And so always when you study out, it's good to look at all directions. And so we have this advice here that he has given. He did not, it doesn't say he went to Yah, but I do think it's interesting that the minute his father-in-law comes around, he bows and he greets him. Doesn't say anything that he said hey to his wife or his kids. But he did honor his father-in-law. He's like, hey, here's, yes, we honor those around us. So that's just a little piece of info to contemplate.
I don't think she went with them either. In the end, she didn't go.
Yeah.
Somebody said that Moses gave her a get.
Yeah, it is said. Some say that she received a divorcement, a get. As we continue to look at this and Yitro and what his advice or what he says, how does it point to us and how it affects us, I believe that we are going to really probably get our toes stepped on today. How many of you are ready to get your toes stepped on and receive a little bit of correction? Because I think that as we study this out, the direction I'm going today, we probably will. In fact, I know we will. So one more thing, I included a map in your notes of the Exodus, but I specifically wanted you to see where Midian was, because Yitro is a priest of Midian, and therefore you can get that picture of where they are and the territory where Yitro is from. Now, Yitro is also said to have been one of the 3 counselors of Pharaoh, the others being Balaam, as some would say, and Job, and Yitro. So all of these 3 were supposed to be counselors of Pharaoh. So they knew how that system worked. They knew the gods. They knew that, or I'm speaking of Yitro specifically, he knew that. And I know, like I said, there are things out there that Yitro may have already known Yah, but we're going to go that other direction today. So in your notes, you see Jethro, Strong's number 3503, Yitro in the Hebrew vernacular, which means his abundance. It's from number 3499, get there, which means remainder, excess, rest, remnant, excellence. And actually, it can mean a lot of different things. So we look at, it can mean a cord or a rope, a bow or a harp string, to preserve a life, to have more than enough. But it also has this sense of to be superior, to excel, or even to gain a victory. Okay, that's a lot of meaning in one name. I'm going to focus in on some specific meaning of his name. Now, remember, Yitro is called other names beside Yitro, Ruel, and some others. I want us to think about the firstborn. And because, as I said, it can have this idea of being superior, to excel, to gain victory, but it's also used to describe the firstborn. Now, could it be that Yitro has something to do with that firstborn? And we need to understand it absolutely, because one of the biggest things said in this Torah portion is you are to be a nation of what? Kings and priests. So probably there's something he's saying that's going to matter to us. Now, in this day and this time, we're sort of removed from the temple and the house and the understanding of things the way they were, but yet we've got to go back to the way things that were so that we understand what the words mean. So is there something to the teaching about the role of the firstborn that's going to affect us? Exodus 4:22 says, and thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, thus saith Yahweh, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. So from the very beginning, Israel is to be what? The firstborn. When we forget that, we forget our role in Yah, because we are to be a nation of firstborn. So right here, we have the choice. Are we going to act and fulfill the role as the firstborn? Are we going to act and fulfill the role of a thief? Now that's pretty harsh words. So I'm going to show you how I get there. And we're going to discover some things and how we approach Yah, because the firstborn is always going to carry on the house. The firstborn is going to carry on the name. The firstborn is called to build a house. Yah's house specifically. Where? Here on earth. Okay. So if we think about that firstborn is also going to be part of a remnant. So you can also throw in that aspect. What's the remnant? Well, the remnant are those that Yah's going to bring forth as his bride, that we're once again going to go to the mountain and be with him. So we have that idea as well. And so when we think about, and he says that you are his firstborn, Israel, and we understand that Israel has always been that. It's not really an accident that Yitro can infer to gain the victory, which I just spoke of, because his visit has everything to do with what? It's in the preparation time. So his visit has everything to do with preparing his people, preparing the house, giving them the tools they need to excel and to be victorious in the walk that you are walking in, and fulfill the role of the firstborn. If you aren't prepared for something that's coming, how will you face that trial, that privilege, that promotion, that tribulation? If you're going to fail. Whether even if it's, I got a promotion, but you didn't deserve the promotion and you weren't prepared, you're going to fail in that job. If there's tribulation coming and you've done no prep work for it, you're going to fail. Well, it's the same thing in this walk that we are doing. We need to prepare. And so Yitro has something to do with getting us ready and to prepare for this walk, prepare for what we are to do. So when Yahweh calls you to do something and you want to be successful, there are actual steps to follow him. It's not just going to come boom like that. There's training in the word, there's training in life, and we have the choice to follow it and sacrifice. Because I'm going to ask, has anybody ever been an athlete or done something that took lots of practice? Okay. Music, anything that you do, it takes a lot of work. I even think about being a cheerleader. Back my senior year of high school, we went to this camp, and I to move my legs up in preparation for that, to move my legs up 2 inches hurt and I was a kid. After a week of camp, I was like, but it took that preparation and that training, and that's nothing compared to life. But if you're going to do something right, it takes practice and repetition. What happens to war? Can we just go out to war without training our soldiers? No, there's training involved. And so it is with this walk that we are walking. And I told you, I mentioned this word thief. Okay. Well, if we don't follow the role and the way we're supposed to do it, that is really who we become, is like a thief. Now we know Yah is the good shepherd, but we also know that there are bad shepherds out there, right? There are wolves that eat the sheep. And by the way, lots of sheep eat. Well, it goes both ways. Okay, if you want to know what I'm talking about, I can't tell you how many people, including John and I, but others, the people that they lead really try to destroy them, to destroy their reputation, question everything, because they're mumbling, griping, complaining, justifying sin. We can go on and on, but it's the way it is. And it maybe nobody wants to hear it, but it's true. But this a hireling will do only what they need to do to satisfy the requirement. How many of us walk this walk, but we only do basically what we have to do to satisfy what we think is enough for God to be called a believer? If a leader can be a hireling, can we as people be hirelings for his word too? We just do barely enough just to say we've done it, but yet really we just want to do the bare minimum. That's the definition of a hireling. Maybe even a thief. So in your notes, I'm not sure if I have it down there, but you can look at John 10 verses 1 through 16 if you'd like. And we're going to look at this word thief, and it's the word kleptis, which means an embezzler, a pilferer, one who abuses the confidence given to them for their own gain. And the tradition handed down has been that we always say, well, it's the enemy, and the enemy is a thief that comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But Yeshua is describing these characteristics in that set of scripture as men too. Can men come to steal, kill, and destroy?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think we only have to look at our society today to answer that question. But it doesn't only happen on the macro level when we look at nations. It happens even in family units. It can happen in relational units, in congregations, because there are men. When I say men, I mean men and women. Okay. There are people out there who don't care to follow his word the way he wants it. In fact, they want to bring as many people to their side to do whatever that sin is they're doing to justify what they're doing. But in Exodus 19, verses 5-6, it says, now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasure possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Okay, there's that word, that buzzword that we heard again. And then it says, truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs by another way, this man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him, the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. And when he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And then it goes on to say, a stranger there they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of the strangers. And when we look at this parable, Yeshua is using it, and he goes, when he talks about he is the door, is there any other way to Yeshua? Is there any other way to life and to be the bride other than through Yeshua? There's only one door. Or, well, actually, there is one real door, but others try to get in the other ways. I know we've talked about a tent before. I don't know how long. It's been a while, but in ancient culture, if you entered any way through the house but through the door of the tent, the opening of the tent, you were considered a robber and a thief. How often do we try to do this walk and call ourselves believers, but we try to do it our own way? If we're trying to do it our own way, is that not trying to enter through another door? And what does the word say? That we are a thief and a robber. That's harsh language. But when we're picking and choosing what we want to believe and how we want to believe it, that's really trying to do it another way. For Yeshua is the Torah. Yeshua is the word made flesh. And he's very specific. He is Yah. And we only do it by going through him. So we can look at it and look at other religions and the gods they put before them. And of course, that's not going to lead to life. But if he's addressing men that are there at the day and the hour, I think it's causing us to make it. What Yeshua are we following? Are we following the Yeshua in our image or the real one in his own image, the image of Yah, who is Yah? For the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, and I have come that they have life and that abundantly. I am the good shepherd. So Yeshua is the door. That is the entry for the sheepfold. And we're supposed to be the sheep. So the Greek word for door is thyra, and it means vestibule, used of an opening or providing passage. The Hebrew word for that is patach, and it means a gate, an opening, a gate of entrance. And it's the example of life Yeshua manifested through Yah's what? His 10 words. Are those commands Yeshua? Are those commands at the very, they are what we are to follow, for they are word of life that brings forth life. And that's the 10 words that were spoken. But then, yes, Joy.
That word is thyroid. What do you call it? Thyroid.
Yeah.
The door.
Uh-huh.
There's a church named Thyatira. Did you read that and connect to that?
When I was studying this, I was like, I would love to go there, but I knew there wouldn't be time today. But yes, I actually, even this morning, I was like, should I go there? Do I have time? No. But yeah, I did think about that. So it's something that would merit study for sure. So we're looking at shepherding, and we're looking at thief and robber when we're trying to enter the door incorrectly, and we're standing upon this word, and we see these words in the Brit Hadashah, but it really as it narrows in and applies to our life. But that's not all. We can go back up a little bit and see that this Torah portion in itself is also talking about these concepts. So we've been talking about the firstborn. What's one of the first things we think of when we think of firstborn? We think of birthright, right? And when I think of the word birthright and we're talking about thief or something else, I think of who despised birthright. Who's somebody you can name? Esau. So we can immediately think about Esau despising his birthright. And no, probably that's not the way to act. Was he Yitzhak's son? Yes. Was he supposed to be a firstborn? Was he the firstborn? Yes. But as we've all studied before, your position in the family doesn't mean as much as your heart. Is your heart right? Because firstborn, your heart's got to be right. So let's look at birthright, because what did Esau want more than anything? He didn't want any responsibility when it came to the birthright. He could care less about shepherding. He could care less about leading, being light, studying Torah, studying his words, knowing his creator. That he didn't care about. He wanted the money. But we also know those two things go hand in hand. So when we look at birthright, it's Bekorah, number is 1062. And it's the right of the firstborn. It's almost identical to the word blessing, which is baraka. So how do we access the blessings and the promises? Through the door, right? Through his house. Do we like the idea of being blessed? How many of us like to say, well, I want to walk in his blessing, or I see the blessing. That's what I want. That's what I want. That's what I want. But how many of us are really willing to put the sweat and the tears and the trials and the tribulation and walk through those things to get there?
I was just going to say, where we're talking about the right of the firstborn is, it's something, it's a right, but nothing is ever, I don't know how to quite say it. It's not guaranteed. You have the right.
You're not entitled to it.
You're not. You have to overcome everything that stands in opposition to attaining it. So Hasatan only has the power by which we give over to him, and therefore, as a right of the firstborn, we have to be careful not to give that right of the firstborn to our adversary. And so, because the adversary is going to deceive, he's going to do everything he can to try to take that birthright and let us not come into the fullness thereof. It's our responsibility to conquer. So it's our responsibility to overcome. And that's why Yeshua says that he has overcome, and that we have been made more than conquerors through him who loved us. So, but we have to conquer. We have to overcome. It's not, it is granted, but it must be secured. So just like Jacob, Jacob was the one who was operating as the firstborn, but he had to step into that role to operate as the firstborn. And Esau didn't like it, but I just kind of see that parallel with all of that. It's not granted. I mean, it's not, you can have the title, but it's not yours until you act on it.
But then you're not going to have the title either, for we don't even, I mean, the title isn't even going to come our way because we begin to be the thief. Rick.
I'd like to back up one step. You're on 18, chapter 18, where at the end of what she was reading, it says, he's talking to Jethro and he's telling him, he says, I judge between one person and another and explain to them God's laws and teachings. So does that mean the people did not have that? They do not have the Torah yet?
No.
It's not given. So he had it. So when was Moshe given the Torah?
Okay, we've got to remember that the Torah has always been. The Torah has been there and it's been handed down. What's happening on the mountain is it's being written down. And so even before that time, when we get there, because I was actually going here, but not yet. So it says that Moshe spent so many hours that was consuming him, but he was teaching the word and he was answering the questions and bringing forth the Torah. That's before he went to the mountain. So he's already teaching and doing.
The Torah always existed.
The Torah, yes.
So the people, how come they didn't know about it? Why must they come to him to get the answers for this? Some way he had it? Is there a time that he was given it?
No, it's been, but we choose to follow it or not. I'm going to ask this question. You guys have the word, but do you have all the answers?
No.
But you have the word, so why don't you? You have the Torah in your life. You have a book that's written down. So what's your problem? I'm being facetious here. You understand? Because we have the responsibility to study and started and study it out. Joy.
So it reminds me, maybe this will help or whatever, but it reminds me of like when we were Sunday goers and we learned all that, right? We had the word, right? But we were doing that. So I think those people that were in Egypt they had it, but they weren't following it. Maybe. Right?
I think part of it is
or
that
they forgot. Maybe they forgot.
I think we have to consider is they were in Egypt and they were enslaved.
Our word has been watered down. We always say that. What we were learning before was watered down. So I have a feeling that what they had was watered down. They didn't actually have it. They needed someone to teach them, to teach them the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, and that mixture is really, they had a little bit of mixture of everything.
Moses got it, I don't know, because he was in Egypt himself.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
His mom
how come he suddenly knew all this, and nobody else seemed to be able to know it?
I believe that family was chosen from the beginning. I got you, Terry. That family. Okay, think about this. Did y'all know Moses was going to lead them out? Yes, he was chosen. And then when his own mother was the nursemaid of him, I believe that she was giving him that word because they are from Levi. They are from those who sat at the feet of Shem. They are from those who the fathers. Do we think that Abraham didn't have the word? Yes, he did. Adam had the word. Enoch had the word. We look at that word was there. But when we live life and we are in our wilderness places, whether it's Babylon or Egypt or whatever you want to call it, we have this tendency to not go in and discover that word for ourselves. We take what anybody said and so-and-so has mixed it up with what they believe and what they believe. And they've in Egypt mixed all that little bit of that word with their gods. Remember, the first thing they do after they say I do is build an idol to worship it. The word was there, but they've allowed mixture instead of going in and going to the pure word. So what we have here, when did Moshe get it? I believe that was being given to him from a young age. And that's why he was set apart. And then remember that Yah was meeting with him daily practically. And not always on the mountain.
I mean, you can't tell me that he absorbed some of that from the burning bush, even though Yah didn't say it, he told him his name. But I believe it's just downloaded in him.
I believe it's downloaded, but I believe that word was there, and the word has been there for everyone. It says even those that don't know him would look around the world, and it testifies of who he is.
I think also if you go back to the burning bush, where that just monumental event took place. If I remember right, how Yahweh revealed himself to Moses, he said Abraham and Isaac and Jacob knew him as El Shaddai, but he is revealing himself as Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, which is, I think there's something very significant because one, it reminds Moses of the past. So there's this heritage. He's saying there's this heritage, and you know about that heritage. You know about Abraham. You know about Isaac. You know about Jacob. You know that they spent time in the tents of Shem, and so we have that download that's been passed on from generation to generation to generation. And I think that's where a lot of it is. I really believe that, yes, probably all of Israel had knowledge of those relationships. I would really come to think that since at this point in time, the firstborns were considered the priests.
They were.
So therefore, they would have maintained that understanding of Torah. But the rest of Israel, they were numerous. So they didn't have the Torah like the firstborn did. And I think this is where this whole passage of Yitro is like, you've got an army of people that have knowledge and understanding because they also have the Torah. So therefore, let it be filtered in the more difficult cases. Let it come to you. And I think that's probably a lot of what we're seeing in a historical picture. But like we were raised in the church, and the church itself, I mean, it taught us the basics.
Yes.
It did, the do's and the don'ts, the right and the wrong, and all of that. And so that we knew about the Ten Commandments.
We think over that. We knew about Jesus.
Uh-huh.
They taught us that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that whole, I think I always like to put it in this picture. We're all crossing a river, and what we had before were these stepping stones where the water was going around, and there was a lot of things that just wasn't clear, but we were stepping one stone at a time, and we were making our way across. But when we came into Torah, all of a sudden we have a bridge that's formed, and it became clear. Wow, this all makes, so now the path is much more clear. Then when we've come into understanding with this, the restoration of the rod of Aaron, now it's like it's been an elevated bridge that is adorned with all sorts of different things. So,
Joy.
Okay.
So I don't want to get off track, but I think people have an idea that everybody worshipped the golden calf, but not everybody did. Isn't that right? Weren't there some that were not doing that? It wasn't the whole of Israel that was worshiping that calf. I know that's not here.
We know that. How many were killed?
3,000.
3,000.
Out of 1 million.
Out of we're talking 3-4 million people. So yeah.
So there had to be some
1,000.
people that were in faith that knew not to do that.
Right.
Either because they just heard it or whatever. Not everybody did that horrible thing.
But what where I'm going now with all of that said, is that I want us to understand that when we worship the way that the 3,000 did, and let's be real with this, Aaron made the calf himself and lied about it, said it jumped out of the fire and was like that. Even his own that he's chosen have sometimes failed to do what they're supposed to do, and that's entering like a thief. And that's what I want to get across, because when we go to this Bakora and we break it down for the Baraka and look at blessing, the Bakora itself has the suffix of this hey, and it means to reveal, to show, to look, behold, and it has the sense of being fruitful and to reproduce. Are we supposed to be fruitful and reproduce? I'll continue with that thought after Terry. Sorry.
2 things. Number 1, when the people were in Egypt, Egypt got into the people. Number 2, Moshe was taught long before he took a breath on this earth. He was taught from the moment of conception. Those babies hear every word that is spoken around them. They feel the emotions and the feelings that their mother feels. They feel reverence, they feel love, they feel anger, they feel frustration, they feel the whole gamut of everything that mother hears and feels.
Good point. That's a good point.
So I want to.
We are starting to mold our children as they're innocent. So I wish I had done that.
Well, I think of our children, our grandchildren, all of that. And
So I want to say this as well, and it's that Eddie and Tammy put this on here. There's probably only 1% of the people who worship the golden calf, but 99% stood by and did nothing. What I wanted to say is
makes
that
you guilty.
not doing anything when you see something wrong is complicit with the ones that are doing something.
Yes.
Hopeless.
You're the high. Yes, absolutely. What does it say? That when a good man does nothing, or when
It's all it takes for evil to overcome.
it's all it takes for evil to overcome. And that's what we see here. But yet here, when we go back to this term, we know that we're supposed to look and see there's this sense of awe. So we are seen as honoring the birthright, the Bekorah, when we become fruitful of the covenant, of his word, of Yeshua. We should be able to reveal or show forth by our life, by our lifestyle, by our words, the light of his presence. It should be evident in our lives. That is one of the qualifications of being a firstborn. If there's no light in us, if it's not evident that that we're Yeshua's, then maybe we are something other than the firstborn, even though we should be carrying that role. So when this becomes a daily walk, when we become those that produce fruit and light, leading others by the way we live. So what are these? These are responsibilities of the firstborn in order to produce fruit. And to produce the fruit, we've got to have the word, which is the seed that brings forth life. That means we've got to guard it. We've got to water it. We've got to take care of it. We've got to study it out so that it grows within us. And we want it immediately. We want the blessing immediately. But when we're doing that as his firstborn, it's going to take time, just as it does in a garden when you plant seed, just as it does in other things. A baby in the womb, there's a moment of conception. The baby's born the next day. It's not the way it works. Jackie.
We got to be bold and we got to be brave, and you can't be a sissy in this walk. Sissies will not bring in what the Lord wants to bring in. You know, I have a friend, she's more than that. And she was doing yoga, okay? And she said, yeah, I know you don't approve of yoga, blah, 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 blah. But then she kept doing the classes. Well, what I do, there was a very good article that came in online. I put it right out there about yoga, all the satanic, what goes with it. And so, and I knew that might put a rift in but it didn't. Because, you got to remind people. And that, you can't be a sissy about it.
And that's true. And that means we don't stand by lightly when somebody is being burnt up by the enemy. Right. So oftentimes we mistake, as the firstborn, this favored position as the birthright as something so great and so the limelight. But here it is. We like the idea of having authority. We like the idea of a blessing. We like the idea of access. We like the idea of, we're chosen. But we do not carry the responsibility that goes with it, the time and the effort and the fire that we've got to walk through. And that's what's important. We're not willing to endure. We are not willing to endure the fiery furnace. And that fiery furnace is where we're forged and shaped and transformed into the firstborn. It's where we are transformed so that Yah can trust us to carry his covenant. And that we've got to understand that a lot of people, in fact, most people aren't willing to shoulder the responsibility of being the firstborn. Isn't that sort of when we even talk about people, in the church, and they've had stuff presented to them and they would rather stay where they are? You know why? Even as pastors specifically, because it's going to involve sacrifice. It's going to involve loss. It's going to involve hardship. It's going to possibly even involve your reputation when you're a pastor or a leader in a church, much less just person in everyday life, because you face that too. Was it costly to change the way you think and believe? Absolutely it was. But now we look at Deuteronomy 4:20, and it says, but Yahweh had taken you and brought you forth out of the iron furnace core, even out of Egypt, to be unto him a people of inheritance, as ye are this day. In Isaiah 48:10 says, behold, I've refined thee, but not with silver. I've chosen thee in the furnace core of affliction. So here we hear that Bekorah. Do you hear that word that refers to that fiery furnace? So what is affliction? Well, affliction is oni, number 6040. It means, of course, misery or affliction. But it's related to anah, which means to sing or to testify, to speak or to shout, even in the midst of the fiery furnace. What does that say? Wow. To me, it says when we're facing affliction, what should we be doing? Testifying by the way we handle that affliction, by our speaking, by our shouting, by our singing. And that also shows that we are acting as the firstborn. And that's really important if we're going to walk in power and authority in this walk. So I want to go. We were talking about Esau a moment ago and how he despised his birthright. Now, we know that Israel is on this journey towards their inheritance, the blessing. And we've talked about they've got to access, in order to access the blessing, in order to access the inheritance, they have to show themselves capable of handling it and the responsibility of the covenant. So, of course, we've talked about that means preparation. But when it says Esau despised his birthright, in Genesis 25:34, I want us to look at that word. It's bazah, number 959. It's in your notes. And it means to despise, hold in contempt, disdain, to trample with feet, to disrespect. And it's a cognate of the word bizah, which is 961, which means it's related. And that means to spoil, prey, to loot and plunder. So despising can have this meaning that carries with it to loot and plunder. If you despise people in the world, or even people that are not in the world, that are in congregations, when you despise or you're upset with somebody, one of the first things we do is we loot and plunder their reputation. We loot and plunder what they've done. We rewrite history even. But that carries with it this idea of this bizarre, spoil, prey, loot, plunder. So when we want the blessing of Yah, but we are not willing to shoulder the responsibility of walking in the Torah, of following his commands, walking in that covenant, of directing our own lives accordingly, where we honor what he's done. We honor the vessel that he's put us in, the living, walking tabernacle. We do not defile it. We follow his ways. If we're not doing that, then we're looting and plundering. So then we are seen as one who despised and disrespects our birthright. Ouch. And we try to access, we're living wrong, we're doing things wrong, and then we want to access our blessing. Does that make sense? That means we are trying to plunder and loot it. We are being as a thief.
We're being like Esau.
We're being like Esau. What does it say about Esau? Yah, Jacob he loved, Esau he hated. Thief. Wow, to me, that's pretty powerful when you think about when we are not willing to shoulder the responsibilities of our covenant walk with him, following his words out, obeying his commands, being intimate with him, doing all these things, spreading forth his word, being light in the midst of darkness, saying something when something bad is going on. When we're not willing to do these sorts of things, then we become as a thief. We become as the one who prays and loots and plunders. And to me, that's really powerful. I don't know about you. There's a lot of silence in the room, but to me, it speaks a lot, and it makes me want to examine my own ways. Because one more time, we are to be a kingdom of priests. Okay? That means there are things that we have to do. If we're going to be a kingdom of priests, then we are going to act as that firstborn, then there is an obligation of following his words. So here we have.
So I want to inject something. So we were talking about the firstborn being the priest, and yet there in chapter 19, that Yahweh is saying, look, I want to make you a whole kingdom of priests, so that everyone's operating in that position.
Right.
Everyone is able to intercede between the Most High and man, to not have to use somebody else to intervene to do the interceding, but to be the direct connection. That was the intent from the very beginning. And so it wasn't even just the firstborn, it was for all. And I think that's really significant. This is, in other words, this is what the Father's trying to do, to move their mindset, that it's not limited to a select few, but let's make it. And so, well, what happened? I mean, we do have the golden calf. It was limited even less than the firstborn to just the Levites, but then it's once again restored with Yeshua, with the Melchizedek priesthood, and we see over in I think 1 Peter. But what a tremendous really tremendous opportunity that's being offered to these people who are fresh out of slavery.
And I want to just go ahead, Michael.
So to get back to Esau and Jacob. So Jacob was actually deceiving his father and stealing his brother's stuff. So that's okay for him to deceive. He dressed up, put fur on his arms so he wouldn't be noticed. That's deceiving his father.
Okay. There are some things we need to, first off, I said the birthright goes, he did not, the
I
birthright,
understand that Esau didn't want his birthright, but is it okay to deceive your father and okay to
it's never okay to deceive. And when we look at it, we've talked about it before in years past.
he still gets a blessing for doing good when he's deceiving everybody?
Okay, let me ask this. Has anybody here ever lied?
Yes.
Has anybody here ever made big mistake?
Yes.
Have you ever done things? Does God still love you? If you're still studying his word, did that make it null and void for you? But here's the deal. Esau did not want anything to do with Yahweh. Here's the next thing. When we've studied it out before, we've talked about Rebekah honoring his mother and doing some things. He already had that. I believe that Isaac was not deceived. I believe Isaac knew, because he's not dumb. Isaac knew, and Isaac was diminished inside at that time. So that means Isaac wasn't, anytime you see that, that means Isaac was sort of going slack on the Torah a little bit himself. And so, because he loved the taste of the wild meat. He loved that game. And we're not going there today, but Jacob did not exactly do it right, but the blessing always goes hand in hand. They're not supposed to be separated at this time. And so he already had that. He just had to have the tools. Now, we've debated before in Torah portions whether he was honoring his mother and he didn't want to, et cetera, whether Isaac knew, which I do believe Isaac knew, and all of these things, because from the very beginning it was prophesied that he would receive it. So I just want us to go back. Is there a difference between people? Let's just take one faith right now that despises Yeshua and anybody that believes in them. Let's just take the Muslim faith right now. Should this kid becomes a Muslim and he's the firstborn, and this kid studies the Torah out and is trying to follow God as best of his ability, but he's made some big mistakes, who should carry the birthright?
The second one.
The second one, even because that's equivalent to Esau was basically going, in your face, I'll marry whomever I want to marry. I'll marry somebody outside of covenant. I'll do what I want to do and follow my own way. You. And that's what we have in this picture of Esau. And then we have Jacob, who says, I'm doing my best. And he's like you and me, I mess up all the time, but that doesn't erase who I am.
Right.
I get on my face and repent. Let's look at David. David kills. David has sex outside of where he's supposed to be. David does all these things. Did that make him null and void of being a king? No. Now we look at Saul. Saul was made king and he didn't follow. Why was it removed from him when he sinned? Because there was no repentance and there was nothing else there. So I know I don't want to belabor it too long here, but just briefly, that's sort of the idea we're looking at when we're looking at Yaakov and Esau. But we go back to the word, and the word is very clear. Esau he hated. And so why? What makes us, we've already talked about being a thief and a robber. And I want to jump over to the text, Exodus 18, verses 13 through 16. The next day, Moshe sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moshe from morning till evening. When Moshe's father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, what is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people who stand around you from morning till evening? And Moshe said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of Yah, that when they have a dispute, they come to me and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of Yah and his laws. And then it goes on to talk about the small things. Let me find the scripture. Where is that? At 15 through 20, it says, but every small matter they shall judge. Okay, I want us to talk about the small matters really quick, because what do you guys consider a small matter? Just shout it out really quickly. Nobody? All right.
Well, that's
My
nice.
neighbor's dog is barking.
My neighbor's dog. Well,
I'm getting tired of it. It's wearing me out. My kids aren't sleeping. Do something, Moses.
what about, I don't like the way they act. I don't like what they said. She thinks she's high and mighty. He thinks he's that. What am I supposed to do with this? We could look at small matters, and they're numerous. But I want to look at those small matters right now in this scripture. And when it's talking about Yitro's advice, when it's talking about what Moshe does from that point on, and see how it affects us. Because we do know that this sets up the way government is done and things like all of these things that happens from this point on. And it changes the way things are done. All right. We know that he's getting men of truth, men who hate unjust gain, men who are able-bodied, who fear Yahweh. Those are the men he's supposed to choose to judge these small matters. But I want to take it back down to being the firstborn, a kingdom of firstborns, a kingdom of priests, and say, how are we to judge the small, quote unquote, matters in our life? Because Yitro told Moshe to provide such men with the Hebrew word for provide is chazah, which means to gaze and vision and to see that which is normally not visible. Wow. What does that sound like? To see something in your life or in the lives of others that's normally not visible, that's discernment.
What's that scripture?
That's that.
Something in the vine.
Yeah, well, we're not there yet. So when we think about discernment, we know that it is a gift, but it's also something that we should walk around in. I've talked about this before. Have any of you walked into a store or place and immediately felt something wrong in that place? I have. And hopefully you have too, because that's discernment. Or you get in the front of somebody and there's just something there and you know something's not right. Well, it goes both ways, because I can tell you non-kingdom people, there are enough kingdom against kingdom battles that when you walk into a room, that spirit of the enemy is within them and it fights too and it discerns you.
Yes.
So it goes both ways, but we are to be a discerning people. So do we discern these things in our lives, these small matters? Jackie.
Even if you get around somebody and you know something's not right, it's probably because their house is not clean, and you tap into that some way. It's like that this is not should be a set apart person from you, because their house is just not where it should be. In other words, they're not where they should be, and you can sense it, you can feel it. So you need to.
Well, that's
You can minister when the Lord sets it up, but stay away.
Right, we're supposed to walk in that discernment. So I want to look at this word small, which is katan, Qatan, and it can mean insignificant or important when it's compared to the huge matters of our life. Now, I'm not meaning as much as, there's a fly bothering. We're talking about huge matters versus not as huge matters, okay, is what I'm saying. So when we think small matters, we shouldn't just think, it's just this little thing that's a nothing thing. Sometimes it might be significant to us and small to others, but that doesn't mean it's not something that we are supposed to judge rightly in our own lives. But when we look at the Hebrew letters of this word katan, each individual letter is always going to retain its word picture. And if we can look at it, since it retains its word picture, we can turn it around, and it's a verb that means to drip or a dripping. And then you look at the kuf and the nun and the tet, and it also spells kanet, which is also related, and it is to vex or make angry or annoy. So all these small matters are like the little foxes that we're going to talk about in the Song of Solomon 2:15 that spoil the vine. And that's why Paul is, I think, referring to in 1 Corinthians 6:1-6, when Corinth is admonished not to judge matters within their local congregations, themselves and some things like that. But Moshe is setting leaders in his body following this path about the small that are supposed to deal with the small matters. Now it says those small matters, him dealing with these matters, will wear away at him. Is there anything in your life when you're dealing with this issue and it just over and over, it just feels like it's wearing you away?
he's probably like, would y'all just be nice? Just be nice to each other and we won't have these problems. just be nice. Yeah, but he said such and such. It hurt my feelings.
I'm going to hurt your backside. What I would have wanted to tell him.
Yeah.
And Coy says something that, keep in mind that Moshe couldn't see the forest for the trees in the situation because he was in the midst of it. Imagine if you're in the midst and you're dealing with millions of people and they're coming at you and you're trying to get it all done and you know you're supposed to do this, but you got to do that and your time is here. So sometimes you need somebody else to come alongside and say, hey, buddy, I can see this. Why not this? But let's look at this word wear away, and it's nabel. And it says in the scripture, will surely wear away, naval tabal. And it's actually repeated twice if you look at it. So if Yah is using this word nabal tabal, you can sort of hear that. And he's saying it in two ways, and he's using it twice in one sentence. Does it mean we should be paying attention to wearing us away? And it means to be senseless, foolish, or to act disdainfully. It's used of treating someone with disapproval or untrustworthy, acting in contempt towards something. Wow, here we hear those same sort of words popping up again. Or in a foolish way, to wither, to languish, to fade, something drying out, wearing away, to lose one's strength. See, these small things in your life, the small things in the nation of Israel, if they're not dealt with in your life, if they're not dealt with in the nation, if they're not dealt with in our congregation, if they're not dealt with in our family, they're going to eat us away. They're going to develop roots down deep within our hearts, and it's going to bring in friends that are really ugly, demonic stuff that's really nasty. Now, when we look at this nabal, this thing to act disdainfully, foolish, if we're not dealing with these things, we also know that it's a cognate of Nebalah, which is 5038, which means a carcass, a corpse, a body devoid of life. Whoa. So what does wearing away in a dead body have to do anything? Something dead.
Decomp.
Well, if we think about that, what happens if you are in contact with a Nebalah?
You're unclean.
You're unclean. That's exactly right. So if that uncleanness is not handled correctly, what's going to happen? You're defiled. And it not only defiles you, it can defile your inheritance. See, Yitro was reminding, if you don't deal with all of this that's going on, it's going to defile the land. If you keep this burden and you have this upon you, it could defile the land because there's no way you can do it of and by yourself. Right. Even here, John and I can't do everything by ourselves. We need people to come alongside us and take up some of the burden and help along the way. And this is a small group. And we've been larger, but no matter what size you are, you've got to have people that will come alongside you and work. And Yitro is reminding him, hey, Moses, let's duplicate yourself, because otherwise things will be defiled in your life. Things will be defiled in Israel. So if you cultivate that dead thing in you, if you cultivate that small issue in your life, if you keep going back to that thing that you dealt with before, you got rid of it, and you keep messing with it again, it's like digging up a dead thing in your life, and it's going to defile you. And if you don't deal with it, and if it defiles you, guess what it's going to do? Anything and anyone else you're around, guess what it's going to do to them? Defile them. Joy.
So this is all good and it's speaking to me loudly, but what I don't know is how to correct it. As far as I'm concerned, the things that weigh me down, there's not people to take up the slack. They're not willing to take up the slack. And I know you felt the same thing. So how do you rectify that in your life to not have those other things come in because of it?
Well, I think specifically right now, these small matters that we're talking about are talking about these little things in our lives that we need to deal with. Because the huge matters, we should be brothers and sisters and help each other carry the burden. But here's where it's hard.
It's the little ones that, or maybe you don't know how to ask for help, or like I said, maybe there's nobody to do it. Nobody to help you.
We have to be willing. When there's nobody else around, we do have to shoulder that task. And honestly, some of these small issues, I think this Torah portion is telling us that you need to deal with that thing in you. Now, it might require deliverance, and then you need some leaders or something to come alongside of you and help you through that. Maybe.
Myself.
Oh.
By myself, I can't. I've tried. I can't by myself.
Well, and there's not everything you can by yourself. Sometimes you need people alongside you to help you do that. And they've got to be willing. We've got to be willing to help each other too. We've got to, and please forgive me if I've ever seen, like, I will always make time for something.
That's not what I was.
But I understand. You're like, how do I get help when there's nobody there to help, when I've got to deal with these things? Willing. And that's a big deal. Are we willing to help our brother? Are we willing to help our sister? And here's the next thing. Or do we keep that brother or sister or that leader bogged down because we keep going on them with the small things, so we can't deal with those that really need it? Because here's the next thing. Sometimes leaders get bogged down because, why didn't that pastor call me? I missed last week and they should have called and they should have said, they didn't get me the notes, or they didn't do that, or they didn't do. See, that bogs people down with these little things that we shouldn't have to deal with. And that's why we see in the word, even why we had deacons and elders and other things that are supposed to come alongside officially. Even those that bring forth the word, they're supposed to be able to focus on the word, and all the other people are dealing with the visitors and the other things that are the feeding. They're doing all of that. But I'm not complaining about that. I'm saying we're looking at the small things in our life. We for Joy's answer, we just need to do better, and we need to figure it out. And sometimes we have to just hit our faces and say, what? Hold that thought, Jackie. Let me finish this real quick. And I want to talk to you about that too. But how many times do we keep digging up old issues, a dead issue, and we keep digging it up and digging it up and digging it up and digging it up, and it's a dead body that defiles us? I'm sorry, we do it. We do it as a people over and over, and we defile ourselves because we talk to everybody about it. Well, so-and-so did this, or so-and-so did that, and they hurt me, and I shouldn't have been hurt, and she did this 20 years ago, and she treated me wrongly, and maybe she or he did treat you wrongly. Get over it. Stop carrying it around. In fact, let's speak specifically about, let's go to one of the commands. We're not there yet, but let's go to the parents. And you've heard me talk about this before. When we begin to, well, mom and dad did this and this and this and this and this. So what? Forgive them and go on, because it says in the word to honor your father and mother. That means you don't speak ill of them, in my opinion. You honor what they say. Now, I'll flat out admit I am far and have been far from the perfect parent, but I know I'm a work in progress. I'm by far not the perfect grandparent. I'm still a work in progress, but I hit my face when I mess up. And it's that same thing when we're bringing up these little issues over and over, and we keep, well, my friend hurt, well, that church hurt me. Well, this is going on, and this happened in my life. I will tell you, you've heard me use this example before, but when I was leading in a big church, huge congregation, where just the class that I helped lead was bigger than most small congregations. One of the things that I noticed as a young person, I was in class in a place of mostly 40 through 35 at the youngest, but mostly in the 40s to 60 to 70. And I was in that place, even though I was in my 20s. And one thing I noticed was that everybody, year after year, is the same things they're dealing with, the same talk, the same issues. Well, I lost so-and-so and I can't get over it. Well, it's time to get over it. The season of mourning is over. Well, this has happened to me. And what I see is this cycle. It's a downward spiral, and it consumes them. And it started off as a small matter, and it wasn't dealt with. So now it's no longer a small matter. Now it's become a huge matter that's going to take a lot more help. But those small matters are destroying us as a people. We're digging up dead bodies. So I think in this Torah portion, when we look at Yitro, it's like when Israel is refusing to deal with these small matters, these small everyday matters, those issues in their own life. I have anger issues. I have addiction issues. And addiction's a big deal. Sometimes it takes help, but we make the choice every day when we choose to continue that addictive behavior. Now, we may need help, but there comes a point in time where you're responsible too. It takes both. Or what's some more? I mean, we could go on and name things. So just think of these things in your life. But when Israel is refusing to deal with the small matters, the everyday matters and the issues in their lives and their homes, it's exposing them as acting disdainfully and foolish towards their birthright. Do we sometimes act disdainfully and foolish to what Yah has given us and what he's called us to be?
We all do.
We all do. And we all can do better, but we're work in progress. But if we recognize it and change, and that's the thing, when we look and we see it and we do nothing, bad. When we look and see and say, we're going to try to rectify this situation, that's something. So how could they be expected to deal with the greater task of seeing the house and handling greater responsibilities if you refuse to deal with the small things? How can we be given greater things if we don't handle correctly what he's already given us? Because as long as we refuse to deal with the little issues, we're likened to a nebula, a carcass, a corpse devoid of life. Ouch. We don't have light that's going to carry on because we're shrouded with all this junk inside of us. We've got to carry the word and bring forth life in all things. But if we remain in a condition, we defile ourselves and everything else we come in contact with. Israel is about to experience Sinai, but before they get there, they've got to deal with these small issues in their life. They got to deal with the small stuff. Oh, he says, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws. And that's,
What verse is that?
I think it's 16.
Yeah,
It was just my translation.
Oh, okay.
And I explained to them God's laws and teachings.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's doing that. And Yitro comes along and he said, that's good. It's good to know. It's good that you're talking to him and it's good that you're doing that. But they also need teaching. And you say, well, knowing is yada, and it's that intimacy. And you know that's foundational. We've got to be intimate with his word. We've got to know him. But do we know everything right off? Or do we need somebody to come alongside us and teach? And so we all need it. Here's the deal. When we come into the knowledge of his word, do we have it all there? No, but you have some people that say, well, I'm Torah observant. I don't need anybody. I don't need anybody to teach me or will lead me along the way. And I hear that over and over, especially in this walk, but that's not true. Yitro comes along and says, you got to teach too. He's telling them, he's helping them know and understand, but now he's like, let's get deeper. Let's get deeper. So like I said, no, it's got that intimate idea, but this word teach is zahar, and it means to admonish, to warn, to teach, to shine, to send out light, to be shining, to make shine, to give forth light. And it goes even further than zahar because you want to have that knowing, and yet there's something more that has to happen. Moshe needs to go dig in deeper with them.
Don't you see that in that 18 where Moshe's father-in-law saying, this isn't good, what you're doing, it's going to wear you out. And he's telling them that they should set up this, don't you see that as the start of this Pharisaic type thing that Yeshua came and talked about is, these guys decided, okay, we're going to interpret this, and this is how it's done. So they took this, and then they took it one step further, and then one step further to the extreme.
I've got a couple cents to put in on that. I think it is because if you look at the second temple period, and that 165 years before the time of Messiah, where you see the change in the priesthood take place, I think for them to legitimize that they're okay in taking over the priesthood is they change the rules, then they go back into Scripture
And they rewrite it.
and then they interpret it the way they want to write it. But then they added this other thing in their Talmud that says, if we as a council say this is what it's going to be, then God has to bow to it. And I think they'll take the scripture out of context, just like many churches do today, in order to twist it.
That's what I was going to say. Our churches, we're talking about this as an example, but our churches that exist, at least here in America, have basically taken the same steps towards, well, this is what that's saying.
Yeah.
And so they're interpreting each and every one of those the way they want to interpret it.
Yeah. It's much
just human nature to do that.
It's much just like the way we get very frustrated in how the courts in our nation are legislating from the bench, and they're not taking the original intent of the Constitution in order to apply modern day issues. And so they just say, well, I don't need that anymore because we have all this other stuff, or because I just have my own feelings on it. Then I'm just going to interpret it and say, this is the way we're going to do it. And then we have the injustices and we have all that sort of stuff. But it's the same attitude. It's the same attitude. It's in the religious world. We see it now in our modern world in the United States, where we ignore our Constitution because we don't go back to the original intent. And so we don't go, that's the way many believers are taught. Well, we don't have to go back to the original intent because we have Jesus now. You know, they throw in the Jesus piece. Well, we have Jesus now. And they don't even recognize, well, what did he do? Well, he went back to the original intent. And
I want to put in a few more things, because anything you start can, if you take it the wrong way, it can be bad. But here's what the original plan was. Men who fear Yah. If you fear Yah, you're not going to change his word. Able-bodied men of accomplishment, not riding on somebody else's coattails. Men of truth. What is truth? Truth is his word. Men of the Torah, men of his word, men who hate, abhor injustice and unjust gain. And here's the kicker, is that we don't do that anymore. And later they didn't do it either. The people that were put into position was, even now, they look prettier on camera. They need to be the leader. Isn't that how Saul was put into office? He looked good, so he's tall above the rest. Were you going to say something, Michael? Okay. I got it. So here we have anything can be corrupted. And unfortunately, we're easily corruptible people because we cannot be moved. It goes back to this priestly calendar. We cannot be moved by our sight. We have to be moved by his word. And so here we have this idea, what kind of people are we put in charge? Who are you allowing to lead you? I mean, if you're allowing people that are easily corruptible and do all these things, maybe the issue starts with you need to change places. Maybe. Bottom line is teaching needs to be done, and we need to be willing to be taught. Right. We need to be teachable and receive instruction. And here's the hardest thing to receive: correction, because people don't like it. Well, I'm your pastor, but you're so-and-so, and I know you. Well, and that makes it hard too, because then as a pastor, should you ever get to know anybody, because then they don't want to receive any correction, they might have to come that way. And that's not good. Then you go back to what Joy's concept is, then you're alone. What idea? But we need to become teachable. That way we're teaching how to bring forth light. We are being that light, and we are honoring that birthright. We are supposed to be a nation of firstborns, and we are supposed to follow these things through and let the small issues not bog us down. Now, I want to do something else. How could we talk about being a firstborn without going to looking at the word segula, which I know we love looking at, right? Yom segula. Because a treasured possession, I think they go hand in hand. We are supposed to be that treasured possession, right? Or is it that? Does it really mean that? Okay.
I hope so. Please don't.
No, I'm not. But I am going to add some things to it, because 2 Corinthians 4:7 says, "Have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us." All right. So here we have Paul suffering from some sort of thing in his life. Who knows what it was? There's all sorts of debates. But he's talking about this earthen vessel. When you think of an earthen vessel as perfect, no.
Correct.
The word earthen vessel in Greek is ostrakinos, which is something made of clay. Skeuos is where vessel is skeuos, which means a container or for something of value. And the Aramaic word is bamana. I've given you all these. They're not in your notes, by the way. This is something I've done other times. So despite our body is fragile, maybe it's broken, maybe it's not as great as it once was, what does it contain? What do you contain within you? A treasure. You contain the word. You contain Yeshua. You are a vessel that contains, I'm looking at it from both sides, a treasured possession. So just like something precious that you might put in a vessel, you are that vessel that contains this treasure. Literally, the words in you, which are bachavan, which is to be in you entirely, is Yeshua in you entirely, but is he in a perfect vessel? Are you a perfect vessel? We're supposed to take care of this walking tabernacle. We're not supposed to defile it in any way, writing our own things on our bodies, putting things in our bodies that shouldn't be. We're not supposed to do that because we need to remember that we are containing a special treasure. So that means anytime we are thinking about marring up this body or putting things within this body that the word tells us we're not supposed to, or that we know we shouldn't, we need to be thinking twice because there's a hidden treasure. Simatha is the Aramaic word, which is hidden treasure. See, Eastern kings, how do you think a king hides his treasure? Where would they hide it? Where would they put it? Close?
Close to their heart.
That's good. That's really good. You would think maybe this big ornate thing would contain their treasure, but in general, you know what it was? It was nothing. It was the simplest looking thing. Probably most people wouldn't just think to look there, right? and maybe, there's a reason we can put that on our lives too, but we contain that treasure and we should keep it close to our hearts because that is a treasure. It's supposed to be within our hearts. So when we think about this idea of this treasure within this clay jar, it's fragile. You're a clay vessel. You're a vessel that's from dirt. You will return to dirt, but you contain something beautiful. The vessels that these kings would put inside, that those vessels might have been of little value to everybody else, but to that king, that vessel has great value. It's the same thing with you. You may think you are of little value, but you are of great value because you contain the most treasured possession, because you are also his treasure possession, but you contain him, which is your sabula. So we may think, well, I'm too short, I'm too fat, I'm not smart enough, I don't know how to study, I do this, I do that. It's not. That's the way you see it. It's not how you're seen. And we've got to identify ourselves the way he sees us.
He cleans us up, but it's still.
I want to give an example that I read, and there was this beautiful ornate vase that they had, and they kept it in this nice place in their house where everybody could see it. And one of the kids broke it. Of course, what do kids do? They either try to put it back together, they go throw it away or hide it or whatever. And for a couple months went by, nobody noticed it was gone. But the lady, she had something else. It was broken. It was ugly, and it had, I can't remember what was in it. It was this ugly thing, but they served water, drink in it or something, and it wasn't pretty. But it contained something that would bring forth life to the family. And when it was broken, the family mourned over that one little thing. It was ugly. It wasn't near as beautiful as that one thing that never contained actually anything. It just looked pretty on the outside. But it was of far more value to the family. They immediately noticed it was gone. And that's what we're supposed to be. When we're not fulfilling our purpose as the firstborn, when we're not walking where we're supposed to be, we are his treasure possessions, but we contain a treasure possession, and we're not doing what we're supposed to do. So something's missing. So let's continue with that thought and go on to Exodus 19:5 one more time. Now, therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my commandments, then you will be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. So peculiar. Is that really the word? Peculiar? Peculiar treasure. So when you think of treasure, you think of our treasure chest, or I'm a treasure, but that's not how God determines treasure. So what the word peculiar, I'm being a pirate. Our Amarillo would have gotten it. Thank you. And I think Jonathan would have gotten it too. Thank you.
He doesn't have much fun.
Thank you, Terry.
You got to have a boat
All right. Let's,
and a mission.
an eye patch. Okay. Okay. Let's get off of Rick.
So, the latter days in Revelation, isn't the Church of Philadelphia identified as Amsagula, my treasured, set apart people?
I have to look at that. I read it off the top of my head right now. I didn't go there yet.
I think that's how Michael Rood described it.
Okay. I'll look that up. Maybe I can look it up in just a second. Because that's a good thought. We need to look at that. So actually, when it says those texts that say peculiar treasure, there's other texts that don't use that word, but that's not in the text. Surprise, surprise. Because it's sagal, which it's not peculiar, but it does mean a treasured possession. So the word peculiar treasure, sagal, really has this idea of you are a possession. Huh, are you? Are you a possession of someone? So are you highly prized? So we are this special treasure, this special possession to God. The psalmic in this word indicates that possession is one which is carefully protected and sheltered. Ooh, do you like that idea of being a treasured possession? That means you are protected and sheltered. And the gimel shows that you are prized and beloved possession. Ooh, that's good. I'd like to be protected and sheltered and beloved and prized. And then the lamed shows that you keep developing, you're upgrading, you're learning, you're growing, you're teachable. So his peculiar treasure, if you're his treasure possession, which is the correct way to say it, we are under his protection, we are beloved, we are prized, and he keeps polishing us. He keeps upgrading us because we are teachable. We are acting and walking out his commands as that, like the firstborn that's going to bring forth and get the inheritance. And then we also look at this word sagal, which is number 93 in its gematria. And 93 also contains or is the number of inheritance or heirloom. Isn't that interesting? So treasure, possession, inheritance, heirloom, protected, all these sound wonderful, don't they? What does that mean for us? Well, again, we're not just a handful of dust or a broken vessel that has no value. You are a vessel of great value. You are his treasured possession. That means for you, what's he going to do? He's not only going to keep you, but he's going to protect you and hold you and teach you if we're willing to be taught. And we will be prized and loved. Remember, he will go after one and leave 99 behind because that one is a segula, no segula. It's a treasured possession. You are his treasured possession. So does it matter if you're poor, if you're unknown, if you don't have anything, if you're uneducated, if you obey his command, if you follow his ways, you are his Yom Segula. You are his heirloom. You are his prize. You are the apple of his eye. You are precious to him, so much that he would die for you if it was only you. So maybe in the eyes of the world, you and I are worthless. That's not the way it is to him. And that's not ever how we should even think, because we are his treasured possession. And we have great value. We have great value to him. Does anybody want to say anything on that?
When you look at yourself as special in him, you are able to go out and do what he wants you to do. And, I'm not cleaned up all the way. And, just yelling at somebody, having a thought about somebody that cut you off in the corner is, and you may say, well, that's just many things. So we're all on that destination, but we're on his road. We are loved. We are set apart. But you got to take hold of how special you are to him. We're not just anybody. We are chosen. We are set apart, and we are royalty. We are in the kingdom of the righteous. Okay? And when you grasp that, you can clean yourself up quicker and better.
So in that verse, and maybe it's just my translation, but listen to what it says. If you will pay careful attention to what I say, keep my covenant, then you will be my own treasure.
Right.
So there's something that we kind of have to do before we become that own special treasure, right?
Yeah.
See, and I do that. Yes, yeah, that's good.
Because we're relating this special treasure to being the firstborn, and the firstborn can't be the thief. You can't try to skip A, B, and C because you want the blessing. You have to go through and be teachable. You have to go through and deal with the small matters in your life. You have to go through and follow his ways, even though it hurts. You have to guard the temple. You have to guard his word, and then you become that treasure possession. Sometimes we wonder why bad things befall us, yet we know we're not following his word the way we're supposed to the way we are supposed to. And we say, hey, it's like my mom has always said, if you're going to speed, you just got outside of the covering and you wonder why you got a ticket. Well, God, I shouldn't have got a ticket. Aren't I under your covering? No, you were disobeying the world's law. And yes, we are under his law. But my point is, we stray from his word and then wonder why we have to deal with the consequences. Now, sometimes things we're dealing with aren't a consequence of our own behavior. They're a test or a trial. But nonetheless, those tests or the trials are the fiery furnace, which is going to show us so we can deal with the small matters. What's actually going to come up out of us when we're pressed? What's actually going to result and show forth when the pressure's put on us, when the fire hits us. And fire hurts. But in order to be the firstborn and be the light to the world and take care of the family and bring forth his word to your family and to the nations and et cetera, which we are all called to be the firstborn, we have to go through the fire. And nobody wants to. We would rather just have the blessing. I'd rather just have the blessing than the trial. And I don't want any more trials. I hate tired of trials. But I do know there's more work to be done on me. A lot. So but I also want the benefits. I want to be the Yom Segula. I want to be the treasure possession that carries the treasured possession. So let's turn that around. Do we protect his name and do we protect him and consider him our prize? Do we protect his reputation? Do we stand up for truth, or do we just watch idly by as somebody goes and builds a golden calf and then say, oh, look, they did it? Which are we? Because to think about the treasured possession carrying the treasured possession is pretty incredible. And we need to, I think if we are like him, that we've got to do what he does. And we've got to protect his word, protect his name. We've got to make him famous. By the way we live, we've got to spread forth the light to his people and continue that. It goes forth. And if it's like fire, the fire of Yah that spreads that anointing, it's going to go from place to place to place, like a beacon that's burning. And go back to, I guess it was Lord of the Rings, not sure, where they lit the fire on the mountains. Was that it?
Mm-hmm.
The communication. But we should be the fire, and it's so visible that they can say, hey, there's a fire, and then the fire just ignites everything it goes by. But are we the fire on the mountain that's going to light the way and spring forth the truth and let people know that Yeshua is coming back, Yeshua Bo? Or are we the one that's trying to acquire things as the thief through looting and plundering and going through a different door in a different way? Segula is a term that we love, and it is intimate and it's beautiful, but there's obligation that follows, just as Joy said. There's obligation that must come as well, that things that we must do, because it's hard to not look at our current situation as Yeshua's followers and feel that we as the body have fallen short. Instead of being that glorious bride without spot or wrinkle, we're sometimes fractured by those small things, those silly things, those sickly things. And because we're not watching our borders, we're not taking care of things that need to be taken care of quickly. And instead of immaturity, we end up stunted in our growth, drinking milk when we should have reached maturity by now. So we need to close the gap between who we are and who we're supposed to be. And that has to be done on purpose. We have to choose. We have to choose to walk that way, choose to be that way. All right. Anything else on that? Does anybody have anything on that? Okay, since
choose to not walk in sin, that's what
right.
choose him over the world, just like the guy that went up again. Okay, and you know, that's if you wallow enough, you're going to want to come out of that big net. But like he knew what he'd done, and he walked right strode after that. But if you follow that again and you mess up again, get on your face. Get on your face and go to him, because nothing matters in this world. You're not going to get your meaning through accolades, people, through whatever you think that you messed up. God tells you he's it. When we let go of all of it. Say you got a pandering husband, or say you've got a pandering wife. You even have to let go of that. You make the decision, you make the choice with any sin. Am I going to continue in this, or am I going to do something about it? And that's what it comes down to. But you have to go to him so he can have it. You don't take, you don't go in there and try to solve it. You go give it to him, and let him work it out. And if he wants you where you're at, and if he doesn't, he's going to do whatever he needs to get you where you need to be.
We just talked about the fire on the mountain, but I want to talk about that mountain, because Yah gave us his word in order that everything in our lives, our daily dynamics first, but everything else in our lives, our jobs, everything, how we deal with people, that everything we do and everything we are would be permeated by his word, by his word, which is Yeshua, which is light, by his Torah. But there are things that happen on the mountain that are great, and you can see clearly. The air is thin, and everything is very clear sometimes from the mountain. But when you go down from that mountaintop experience, sometimes the environment gets a little thick, and it's a little hard to see. Things aren't quite as clear as they once were on the mountaintop. And on that, in the valley, when things aren't quite as clear as they should be, it's the word that's got to go forth in our lives. It's the spoken word. It's the way we are faced with. We're using our voice to sing, to declare his praises and his word, because it's easy to see clearly when you're on the mountain, but it's even easier to get utterly confused when you go down from the mountain. If you're not careful and following his word. But the goal, Yah's goal in our lives, is that we learn to live by his word, not on the mountain. We have to learn to live when things are thicker, the air is a little thicker, that we've got to learn to see clearly in those times when we're in the valley. How many of you, it's easy to see clearly when you have the victory, right? Oh, yeah, got it. I can see things the way they are. But then you're the muck and the mire, the situations that are in your life. Sometimes it's like, oh, somebody just gave me a thin word at this time. None of us can see clearly completely clearly sometimes here where we are, because we live in the midst of this, we want to keep saying thick air. But at times we get flooded with emotions, and we're overwhelmed by our thoughts, or we allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by our thoughts, confused by our circumstances, and blinded by the pain that we may be walking through. Because part of it is because we don't take those snake eggs and spider webs and crush them and get rid of them the moment they enter in, because we're responsible for that. That's a small matter. That can be a big matter. Is the enemy plants thoughts and ideas, and Yah says to take those thoughts captive, because Isaiah says they're like snake eggs and spider webs that will contaminate what we think and because if we womb the things we think, or how we're wombing those things, they will ultimately result in action. But because we live down where the thick areas, we've got to take great care that we don't allow confusion to enter into our lives, because we do not serve the Yah of confusion. He is not the author of confusion, ever. We must learn to see clearly, even here. So we have to learn to live by his words, even when we're not on the mountain, even when we are not on that mountaintop. Okay, anybody on that? No?
We love.
We'd like to stay out of the pea soup.
No, we love mountaintop experiences, though. I mean, and we love to be reminded of those mountaintop experiences. Because, for example, I've been playing some of the old Christ for the Nation worship, where they have it's the full album that's on YouTube now, and
Which one?
It's probably been there for a while. I played Mighty River today, 1995, and I was playing another one this morning from 2003.
Which one?
I don't remember which one it was. No, or 2000, maybe it was 2000. But oh my goodness, I'm like,
The words are good. The
I'm
songs are good.
I'm pulled back to those mountaintop experiences. You know, since I attended Christ for the Nations, you know, I just love the worship. You heard my testimony about the worship there, but then we live in this reality, and it's nice to be refreshed of those memories. But it's also the fact that we're not relegated to no longer experiencing those tremendous highs. We can always have more. And the valleys remind us that the next mountaintop is on the other side. And so we're just passing through this valley to get to the next mountaintop. But we have to have the valley. If we have sunny 70-degree weather every single day, it'll be so commonplace, we don't expect anything different. But if we have 150 degrees and we have 0 degrees, we love the 70-degree, beautiful, no wind, light breeze days, and no stuff spraying in the skies. And we just like, we relish those. But without the other stuff, we don't embrace those. Yeah, we don't embrace those mountaintops. And that's where we're, that's what this whole Yitro Torah portion reminds me of. Tremendous. We always reflect back to Yitro when we're talking about all sorts of stuff. When we go to the second chapter of Acts, we just think about, wow, this is tremendous. But then we live in reality, and all of those experiences make up who we are today to get to the next mountain. So we got to have it. And so we carry those experiences, and that's who forms us. That's what makes our character and causes us to be who we are, so that we can be a light in the valley, an inspiration in the times where it seems so bad.
Amen, Jackie.
I think also we're in the valleys and we're in the mountaintops. But the Lord has met me in the mountaintops many times, okay? And he's met me in the valleys. But the mountaintops, I believe, is where we need to strive for. And, the kingdom is going to be more like a mountaintop than a valley, because there's not going to be tears. There's not going to be sorrow. That's what there's scripture that talks about that. So, you need to go into the mountaintop to fill up, fill up the spirit in you. So, I just think the mountaintops are very important. We don't learn anything if we're not willing to go in the valley.
All right. I want some questions from this tour portion. Let's see if we can, or some comments. It doesn't have to be questions. It can be comments or observations. There's a lot of ground we haven't covered today, and I don't ever want to leave here without, if you guys have a question or a comment or an observation, I want you guys to let us know. And that goes with you guys online too. Is there something you would like to bring up? Or I guess you could always give John a call and you could be online and do it that way too.
Going back to when I said the baby knows what the mother goes through. The reason I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt is when I went through nurses training, I got to take care of giving this little girl her very first bath and take her into mama. Well, the scale and the sink were side by side. You put a naked baby on a cold metal scale, they're going to scream and kick and fight to get off because it's cold. I reached up and turned the water on and warmed her up for her bath. Nothing changed except she heard the water. She got just as still, quiet,
Wow.
looking around. And I'm like, oh my Lord, what did your mama do for me? Hold on for her. And she said, really? I asked her, what did you do for me? She was a hairdresser.
And so she heard the water turning on all the time. She heard the what? Go ahead.
The baby heard the water running.
She was a hairdresser.
Mama was a hairdresser. She worked for an RN. It's a missionary's daughter. The first job she took as an RN, and pastor she sat under.
They can't understand you.
You used to point this direction that way.
They were pregnant with their first child, the pastor and his wife. Well, every day when he got home, he would lay his head down on Mama's tummy and rub her tummy and tell the baby everything they believed. When she gave birth to that child, it stopped. Okay. Well, when they had a boy, when he went into kindergarten, they got a call and Daddy had to go down to the school. The little boy was in trouble. And Daddy went in and talked to him and said, son, you know why you're here? Yes, Daddy. I wouldn't color the witch. Why wouldn't you color the witch, son? You always told me. Always told me. When he was in the womb, they did not believe in that. And he refused to color the witch because that's what Daddy said.
Wow. That's pretty telling.
It is. And
Yeah,
so
well, they understand language. They're saying they understand language
and feelings.
Before they're born. So they're understanding language when they're born.
It makes me want to say, Kelly, Jonathan, how are you taking care of my grandbaby?
Yeah, the newest one.
But Elora, yeah. So any other comments, observations? And again, even Eddie, Tammy, all you guys, you can call John's phone or something if you want and comment and we can put it on here.
There was something in here where you had Laban.
Yeah, I didn't go over that.
I noticed, but that's all right. Nabal and Laban are the same exact words reversed.
Right.
I thought that was interesting.
And then in your notes, you can sort of see what they mean and bring it, because I was going to talk about that concerning the small things, but I was not sure about my time, so I cut that off. So anything else? Nothing? All right. Well, you guys, we are so blessed that you've joined us today. Thank you for partnering with us. And John, you can talk about all that. And so.
Yeah. So if one thing is, I just want to give everybody an update. We are at the beginning of the month where our rent is due. It's going to pull from our account at any point in time. So we definitely need some assistance.
Tithes and offerings, if you haven't done it yet.
Love gifts, anything like that, just pray. And you can go to our website, click the donate button. You see our website right there going on the screen. Just click the donate button and you can go in there and get a donation online. Or you can send it and drop it in the mail at our website. You'll have our physical address. You can mail it that direction. We sure appreciate everybody that's helped us financially in this ministry.
But
we couldn't do it without you.
But I want to say too, if you consider this ministry of value and it is giving you food, just like when we go to a restaurant, be a partner with us. Be a partner with us and join with us. Partner with us on this work, because when you go to a restaurant, you pay for your meal, don't you?
Hopefully.
And we need partners that are with that. Even if you do a monthly thing, that would be awesome. But the ministry is not free. People think it's free, but it takes money to go around it. And we love blessing you. And we would love for you to become, not only partner with us through your prayers and other things, but through finances as well. And so tithes and offerings are very important. That's what it says in the word. Why are you under a curse? Because you have not brought forth your tithe. It says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in Yah's house. Test me of this and see if I will not open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have room enough to contain it. I will prevent the pest from devouring your crop and the vine from casting its fruit before its time, and the nations shall call you blessed. So just a thought. Anyway, we are so, that's right. We are so blessed to have you as family, and you mean a lot to us. And we will see you on here in just a little bit at 3 o'clock. The next part of our service starts, and
3 o'clock Central.
3
We'll
o'clock
see you there.
Central Time. Blessings and shalom.